So how does something like this even happen? How does a modern, educated country fall under the spell of one of history's most destructive regimes? It wasn't just one single event. It was this perfect storm of humiliation, chaos, and absolute despair that paved the way for Nazism in Germany. Let's dig into exactly how it all went down.
Okay, let's start here. It's the spring of 1945. World War II is in its final, chaotic days, and a prominent German doctor, a Nazi, turns to his wife and says these absolutely bone-chilling words. He was terrified of the revenge he was sure was coming for them.
And get this, his 11-year-old son, Helmuth, he overheard everything. The very next day, his father took him out for one last good time in the woods and then went to his office and shot himself. Little Helmuth was so traumatized that for the next 9 years, he refused to eat at home because he was afraid his own mother would poison him. This isn't just some sad family story. It's a terrifying glimpse into an entire nation's mindset.
So what could possibly drive a man like that, a respected doctor, to such a dark place? What kind of fear and guilt could grip an entire country so tightly? To really get a handle on his desperation, we have to rewind the clock. We need to go back to the end of another terrible war.
The real story, the roots of the Nazi Party's rise to power, it all begins right here. It starts with the absolute humiliation Germany felt after being defeated in the First World War.
The Treaty of Versailles in 1919, well, it wasn't really a peace treaty. It was a punishment. I mean, just look at this map. Germany was literally carved up. It was forced to give away huge pieces of its most important industrial and farming land to its neighbors. The map of Europe was redrawn, and Germany was paying the price.
I mean, you can just feel how crushing this must have been. And it went so much deeper than just losing land. Germany was stripped of its economic engine. We're talking 75% of its iron and over a quarter of its coal. But the deepest cut, the one that really stung, was psychological. The infamous war guilt clause forced Germany to take all the blame for the entire war and then pay reparations so massive they would cripple the country for generations.
And here's the critical part. Germany's brand new democracy, the Weimar Republic, was basically born in defeat. From day one, it was tied to this national shame. Angry nationalists started calling its supporters the November criminals. So you can see how this entire new system was incredibly fragile right from the very start.
So on top of this foundation of resentment, the new republic was just drowning in political instability. It was a nation literally at war with itself. The whole political scene was a complete battlefield. On one side, you had communists and socialists, inspired by what happened in Russia, trying to take over. On the other side, you had furious nationalists and war veterans attacking the very idea of democracy. And this created a fatal split. The parties on the left became such bitter enemies they could never, ever team up against the rising threat of Nazism.
And believe it or not, a fatal flaw was baked right into the system itself. Article 48 of the Constitution, it was basically a self-destruct button. It gave the president the power to just suspend civil rights and rule by emergency decree. It was a perfectly legal backdoor to a dictatorship.
And because the politics were so broken, governments were just constantly collapsing. Think about it, 20 different governments in only 14 years. This constant chaos just destroyed any faith people had that democracy could actually solve any of their problems.
Okay, so this political chaos was on a collision course with a total economic apocalypse. Two unbelievable financial disasters would push German society right to the absolute breaking point.
First up, hyperinflation. In 1923, to try and pay its war debts, the government just started printing money like there was no tomorrow. This made the German mark basically worthless. I mean, people literally had to use wheelbarrows and carts just to carry enough cash to buy a loaf of bread. Just look at these numbers. The speed of this collapse is just staggering. In April, $1 was worth 24,000 marks. By December, it took trillions. People's life savings were just wiped out overnight. Gone. So Germany was just barely starting to recover, mostly propped up by American loans. And then, bam, the 1929 Wall Street crash hits, and it sends this tidal wave of economic destruction across the ocean. The whole world falls into the Great Depression, and Germany, totally dependent on those loans, gets hit the absolute hardest.
By 1932, unemployment had skyrocketed to an unbelievable 6 million people. You'd see men on the streets with signs around their necks that just said, "willing to do any work." These pictures, they just capture the raw desperation of it all.
The middle class was terrified of becoming poor. Mothers couldn't feed their children. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was a crisis of the human spirit. People were desperate. They were looking for a savior, for anyone who had just promised them a way out.
And it was right into this swirling vortex of national shame, political chaos, and economic ruin that Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party stepped forward, and they offered a radical solution.
Now, this chart says everything. In 1928, before the Great Depression really hit, the Nazis were just this tiny fringe party. They had less than 3% of the vote. Just 4 years later, deep in the crisis, they were the biggest party in Germany, with 37%. You can't deny that connection.
Their propaganda was brilliantly simple and brutally effective. To a nation that felt humiliated, they promised pride. To a broken economy, they promised jobs. To people filled with despair, they promised a glorious future. A future built by, in their words, weeding out all foreign influences. They gave people simple answers and a clear enemy to blame for all their problems.
Hitler was a master of political theater. He understood that in times of chaos, people crave order. They crave a sense of belonging. These huge rallies, the sea of red banners, swastikas, and perfectly synchronized salutes, they weren't just speeches. They were rituals. They were designed to make every single person feel like they were part of something powerful, something overwhelming.
So here's the key takeaway. Nazi propaganda didn't just offer political policies, it offered salvation. For a nation that felt completely broken and shamed, this image of Hitler as a kind of messiah, someone who could deliver them from all their suffering, well, that was an incredibly powerful and seductive idea.
And that brings us right back to that doctor in his office in 1945. The story of Hitler's rise isn't just something in a history book, it's a timeless warning about how fragile democracy can be when people are pushed to the absolute brink. It forces us to ask a really tough question. When all hope feels lost, what kind of promises start to sound good, and who are we willing to follow?